How's it, everyone? Wayne the Unknown here, and welcome to Geekin' Out, where we basically discuss everything nerd and geek related. I am joined here by Bob Greenwade and also Brian Montihano.
Going on?
How's it going, you guys?
Oh, just fine.
What was that, Bob? We can sort of hear you. You may need to turn your computer mic on. Sorry, everyone. Bob is trying to get everything all situated here. Anyway, how you guys doing so far?
Oh, just fine.
Can still sort of hear you, Bob. I think he's getting. Well, Bob is getting ready. In this first live episode for Geeking Out, we are going to be talking about comic book adaptations from comic books characters that have been brought to the big screen and small screen.
And I also thought it'd be interesting to do the reverse too.
Oh
I've
yeah,
got a bunch of stuff that's gone from movies into really good comic series. Not that they're always great, but at least good. And as always, I am prepared with source material. So
yeah. I mean,
yeah.
source material is always a good thing. Are you with us now, Bob?
Oh, you're completely mute now, buddy.
Oh yeah, he is. He's not. I don't have him on mute on my end.
No, I just can't hear him.
All right, weren't you able to weren't you last time able to connect it with the computer mic? I think there should be like an option.
No, there's
Oh, sorry for
live
everyone.
shows are great, man. Yeah. Like Douglas Adams said, technology is the definition of something that just doesn't work yet.
Sir, we cannot hear you, Bob. Okay, I think we can. You can sort of hear him, right, Ryan?
A, a little bit, yeah. I
All right.
Okay.
Well,
Bye, Bob.
while Bob's away. I guess start. So basically, to begin, there are such iconic comic book characters: Batman, Wonder Woman, Superman, The Flash, Green Arrow,
Sure.
X-Men, Avengers, Deadpool. Over the past 60 plus years, a good chunk of these well-known comic book characters have been adapted into either an animated show, animated movie, live action TV show, live action movie, and
Sure.
I mean, and they've all some have done well better than others, some
Oh, for
haven't.
sure. Oh, there's one more thing I want to grab real quick that's right here, since we're thinking about it. But yeah, it's varying degrees, and it also depends on who's involved and what platform it started on and where it ended up. I mean, that's just the name of the game. Because there's basically the way I've always looked at it, for every good one, there's it's probably 1 to 10. There's 10 that aren't so good, and then probably 5 that are worthwhile. I mean, there's really been very few great adaptations either direction, or ones that I would say are stellar. And I can't find the one example I'm thinking of that, which I've got. Oh, there it is. Aha, it's right here. Okay, cool. So got that one too. Uh, but overall, going as far back as the early '40s when they did the Batman live action
Oh,
stuff. You know,
the serials, yeah, I've
yeah.
seen.
Hmm.
I've actually
And
saw how those.
oh,
So
but
it
they
was
were
during World War II era, and I've heard what the Batman calls a certain Japanese soldier. I'm not going to quote the thing, but if
yeah.
anyone's willing to see it, look it up.
But what's interesting about that? Those they were, well, not just only be a product of their time, obviously, but they were pretty accurate to Bob and Bill's original ideas. They because Batman took a really weird change, and it was Bill Finger and then what's his name, Joseph, that actually kind of changed stuff with the direction it went. Because Bob, It depends what your opinion of Bob Kane is. Some people call him what he actually might have been, and other people still regard him as a visionary. I'm indifferent. I just like the fact that it came into the world. But when they changed the direction and they started making it a little bit more noir and detective based, those serials were actually pretty close, minus the limitations of the time. The suit was a little silly, the car was a little silly but that's what they had. And it was probably one of the better early adaptations of anything, because it was still character driven. It was done by people that cared. It was a serious attempt, so you can start there where they were going in the right direction, and it really wasn't done for money. It was done for popularity and the drive sales of the character. The movie, or the uh, interstitial stuff like you saw in movie theaters, like Flash Gordon, which is another one that got its thing. Um, we're done for the love of sake of adventure and getting these popular characters up in a different medium than what they already were. Plus, they worked really well,
Oh
you
no,
know,
they did.
cheap to make.
Are you still with us, Bob? Or are you still having issues?
Oh,
Testing now?
that's better.
We sort of hear you.
And how's that?
That's even worse.
What's option so far then?
Oh,
Should
if
I
you keep your
your mic closer?
oh yeah,
Yeah,
keep your
it's a
mic
little
closer.
better.
Yeah, that we can hear you just fine if you keep your mic closer to you.
Okay. I'll keep this hanging off my nose or something.
So as we were saying, I guess for you, Bob, what were your thoughts when you found out that your favorite comic books as a kid were being adapted into TV shows and movies?
Um, the, my favorite ones
What
were
I mean, what were your thoughts when
just
when you heard that they were being turned into one?
just in general, because of course I grew up in the '60s. I had the animated um, Justice League early in the '60s, and the
The early
Fantastic
Hulk.
Four, Spider-Man, Super Friends, Spider Friends, and somehow they managed to add the word friends and instantly make it cheesy. But
Only the old days of animated superhero shows where you can only either move the character or move the mouth, but you can't move both.
yeah, kind of like that. The Hanna-Barbera studio, I think, had a hand in most of those, at least the DC ones. But I was enjoying seeing them. I mean, I think the only times I really saw at the time my favorite superhero, which was the Flash, was on the early Justice League um, cartoon series, and then later on in the later seasons of Super Friends, when they started expanding and doing more Justice League members. Um, that I was excited. That was what really got me hooked on this whole superhero genre was watching those now very old and even at the time cheesy cartoons.
I mean, what I find interesting about animated superhero shows, they can fit in a lot of characters and do well. But when you try to bring that into a movie, you're the directors are looking at so many different source materials. Like, let's add in this character, let's add in this character, let's add in this character no one's even ever heard of. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I mean,
Depends on who's behind it. We go
Yeah,
back to some
it
of
it
was
some
works.
of
It
Howard's
works. It works. It works
creators.
for the MCU though. not
Uh,
not.
to a certain extent. I mean, you have to truncate a lot of stuff, but it does.
it did not work for X-Men: The Last Stand.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Yeah. Uh,
That's the different. That's you're gonna hear a lot about that in a podcast we did a while back.
yeah.
Oh, that was all over the place.
Yeah.
Um, I guess starting for you, Brian. Before we talk about characters we want to see, we're gonna talk about the adaptations that we have seen in the past 70 plus years. Um, what was the very first adaptation you found it from you saw from a comic, whether it was an animated or live action?
That I knew was from comics would
Yeah.
probably be Spider-Man and the 70s live action show and the cartoon that was at that point in syndication.
Oh, the
Uh,
Japanese live action show.
no, the American one, like the Revenge of the Dragon and all that stuff. Yeah, the live action.
I've never heard of that.
What? Okay.
I wish I could
It's
show it on here, but I have
yeah.
StreamYard. I have this free StreamYard, so I can't show people.
Okay.
So sadly,
So
they'll have to look it up.
the American live action Spider-Man, it didn't last very long. It started off with a pilot that was a movie called, like I said, like Return of or Revenge of the Dragon or some crap like that. It was a really interesting storyline, but I watched that, and I don't know if I actually consciously knew it was from comics, other than like maybe having seen them, because I don't have any older brothers. I'm the oldest one, and my father is not really into that stuff. So somewhere
Oh,
just in
okay.
the
I've heard of it now.
that's the one. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So somewhere in the cultural zeitgeist, obviously Spider-Man was a
Nicholas
comic
Hammond
book character.
is what it's
Yeah.
called. Okay.
And yeah, that's the kid from Sound of Music. And with like neighborhood kids at school, Halloween costumes. I remember thinking I was Peter Parker and wore my Spider-Man Halloween costume until I got caught. Like I outed myself and then I never wore it again like that. But I'm just saying, that was probably the first exposure, and then along with that came with Super Friends and the Hulk and Spider-Man and Friends and all that stuff over the years as it came. So it would be the cartoon and the live action would probably be the first introduction, and it would be Spider-Man is the one that I can remember. But then also, Wayne, at that time too, they were still running the Hulk live action series, so that was still first run
Oh yeah, the
for
one with
me. With
Lou
Lou
Ferrigno
Ferrigno
as
and
a
Bill
whole.
Bixby, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and then that didn't end until what 1990 when they killed him. I think is when the last one was when they brought them all back for the
But
death of Incredible Hulk.
they're going into TV movies primarily by that point.
Yeah, but I
Uh,
mean that was the last
I
of
think it
the live action.
was somewhere in the 80s, I think.
See, I want to say it was 90, but somewhere in there anyway. Yeah, with the death of the Incredible Hulk. But I'm just saying that was all still first run. Then there was the big gap, and they brought the Judgment of. So there was those serials that were taken fairly seriously, and the cartoons which weren't, but were still a lot of fun. So yeah, it was just that kind of stuff that was out there first run live that would be my first exposure, and I'd say, like I said, Spider-Man
I
for
think
sure.
my first exposure to live action anything, and anyone who's watching this or will watch it afterwards, don't judge me. My first exposure was the Dean Cain series,
Oh,
Superman,
the Lois, yeah,
Adventures of yeah, Superman
Superman
and
and
Lois
Lois,
Lane. Yeah,
yeah.
from the 70s. That was my
No, that wasn't the
exposure.
'70s, dude. That was the '90s,
I
man.
mean, that in the
Yeah.
90s, that was my exposure, seeing Dean King as Superman. I remember watching like ads for it,
Oh
the
yeah.
trailer where he's like chugging the gallon of milk and everything. That was my exposure to,
So
that
you
was my
didn't
exposure to live
see
action.
the live action Flash at that point, then?
No,
Okay.
I was just slowly finding out about. I mean, I wouldn't get exposed to another comic book character until till the 1990 mid 90s Spider-Man animated series, and
Okay.
then I would eventually get exposed to the live action Batman afterwards. Again, I was introduced to this stuff in the 90s. I didn't know
Okay.
anything about comics. I
Because
was just
there's
introduced to animated and live action stuff
all right, yeah.
mid
Because
to
there
late
was a lot
90s.
of attempts. I mean, hell, there was even a Doctor Strange done by New World, which is Roger Corman stuff back in the late '70s. It was, oh, that was rough, but it was a thing. So they've been trying to capitalize on this stuff for a long time. And like I was saying before, for every hit, you had quite a few misses, or just, well, hell, was it Red Brown did Captain America in what was it, 79, 78,
Yeah,
79?
and it was actually not bad.
Well, for what it was, yeah. I mean, Reb's Reb, Space Mutiny and Uncommon Valor and stuff. Red Brown, Yor and all that stuff. Hey, whatever. He's a B movie trope and superhero to me.
Seen him
But
in.
what's that?
Captain America is the only thing I've ever seen him in.
Oh, that's probably because you weren't looking. He's been in a ton of stuff. But anyway, they had made those attempts back then. Take it or leave it, whatever. They were fine for what they were. But they've been doing this stuff for a long time. It's
I mean,
just for everyone that you've heard of, there's 10
since
that you
like
didn't.
the late 30s. You mean you even had Superman, who is just basically wearing like pajamas in a sense with a cape.
Well, the Fleischer cartoons I think came first.
Oh,
Yeah,
It just,
that was the
Okay,
first full motion adaptation. I want to say that was before. Well, yeah, because the Superman live action series was in the 50s.
okay. I
Yeah,
just
and the
remember
Fleischer
seeing.
cartoons were late 30s, early 40s, and they're fantastic. And the
They're
reason why
like
they're fantastic, they have
they
like
look like
this.
they're straight out of the comic.
Yeah, and the way they did that, I've looked into this stuff. It's incredible. They actually drew on black paper, and that's why the coloring, like in the lava and some of the other scenes, all the colors are so vibrant because it's up against that black paper. It was a great cartoon series, and fairly well budgeted for the time, and once again, fairly accurate because that was still early Superman, where he wasn't necessarily flying, he was still jumping and stuff. But animation seems to be the one that works the most consistently for any adaptation. I mean, I have one or two arguments to that for live action, but as far as getting the core of the characters down and what they can do, I'd still say animation comes out on top across the board, with a few exceptions.
I mean,
That's just my
that's
opinion.
that's fairly understandable. Again, I wasn't introduced to this stuff until like the late '90s. Going to Circuit City, seeing a clip from Batman Forever,
Yeah,
and I was like exposed again. Even read comics until like, oh god, I think like 2016, 2017 is when I was exposed to comics, and then
sure. And
oh,
realistically, the comics.
there's more to this than what we see on
Oh,
TV or on the big
yeah.
screen.
And that's one of the problems with trying to do an entire character and their arc in one or two movies is because the hell, dude, Deadpool's pushing 30 years old now.
No,
Maybe
that's why he
more
came
than that
out.
at
It
this
came out
point.
around the '90s, created
He,
by
Rob, yeah, it was Rob Liefeld
Rob
from it
Liefeld.
was X
Couldn't
Force
and
number two.
couldn't
Yeah,
draw feet.
yeah. So, you've got that much time, and even if it's a bi-monthly comic or or monthly with more rapid, that's a lot of story arcs you're trying to condense into 2.5 hours at most. Even a 3-hour film like these MCU ones, but they've already got so many other people in there. It's a tough task. So if you get the core of the character right and they give them their solo film, that's fine. It works. It's when they try too much too quickly that it just falls apart, especially with too many. Um, and with the average character having like probably 50 years of history, you could take any point on it. That's a tough one. It's really hard to do well if you don't have the right people in there. Once again, with a few exceptions, but you got to have the right people behind it. One of one of my favorites in that regard was Kick-Ass. All right,
So that
and
was
the
the
reason.
comic before the movie, or was it the movie
Oh yeah,
first and then
no,
the comic?
this comic way before the movie. Um, for
Learn something
as
new every
much of a
day.
departure, that the movie had to take from the source, it made the right changes because they had the right people involved, and it was the right, because Mark Millar was involved in that. They made the right changes for the medium, so it's a great adaptation. It's not a translation. I have an example of that one because there is a difference, by the way. There are adaptations and there are literal translations of these things. So like for every good one that you get like that with needed changes, you get ones that just fall flat because they have no idea what they're dealing with and they're just throwing it on the screen. We've discussed one of those examples, and then there's
Hmm. Bob is familiar with that too.
hmm yeah.
yeah,
Um,
you're going on to the question of what our first live action exposure was, and of course, I'm old enough to have watched Batman with Adam West when it was initially aired.
Yeah.
back in the '60s,
Yep.
what we call the campy era of
Yeah.
comic book characters.
I know that too.
Linda Carter's Wonder Woman too at the time.
Well, and
There
there
was
was Shazam. That was another one that was around that time.
I was about to bring that up. Shazam, right after DC bought up everything that was Fawcett, or at least everything that was
Yeah.
Captain Marvel.
That
That's
was
right.
that was an interesting one too because nobody really knew what to do with Captain Marvel, aka Shazam, and it was this huge fight between the two companies and stuff. So that live action show, as ridiculous as it is, wasn't bad. I mean, it really wasn't terrible, but it wasn't
Her
great
main source of
either.
transportation was the Winnebago trailer.
Well,
Yeah,
but
yeah. It
it
had this
it
silver age mentality going on, but for all that, it worked fairly well. It lasted, I think, 2 seasons.
Yeah, something like that. But it was
But
a honest attempt. Yeah, it wasn't terrible. There have certainly been worse.
I remember at a local con, the guy who played his. Go ahead, Bob. Sorry.
Captain Marvel, in fact, if you're going to back up a little bit, had a live action movie serial adaptation before Superman.
Yeah,
Fawcett
as Captain Marvel. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
that's right.
Fawcett actually managed to get that ahead of DC.
I remember hearing the thing about Captain Marvel, how it's back in the '70s, Marvel Comics was fighting DC over the rights to the name.
Well, it's
Yeah,
because that all started back when they were like Atlas and stuff too. And then when they switched the name over, they figured they'd keep it. Yeah, if you go into the down and dirty, gross history of both of those companies, it it not to say there's any villains necessarily in there, but there was a lot of crazy stuff going on, and then financial restrictions were causing them to give up rights here and there. But yeah, the Captain
For
Marvel thing was really interesting. Yeah, yeah,
for
and
anyone
it had
wondering,
animation and stuff. It was a solid attempt. It was not
I
bad.
mean, the suit, Shazam suit was accurate to his comic book counterpart.
One variation of it. Yeah, yeah, it's
I
not
mean,
bad
I
at
know
all.
there's other variations where he has the hood and everything, and
Yeah,
then
that's recent.
yeah, but it wasn't bad. It was good. So far we've talked about like adaptations and stuff. Whether it be TV or movies and what have you. I had mentioned earlier that there's like versions of a translation.
yeah,
Like
you're saying movies turned into comic books.
well, what I meant initially, yeah, and I've got examples of those too going that way. So, uh, as instead of making an adaptation of a comic into a movie and taking your own spins and stuff on it, there's one example for me that it was actually a literal translation. It's because it involved somebody who cared and the original creator. All right. It's about as close as you can get, other than the Max. The Max was a great cartoon show on MTV back in the day. That was like the only difference is you didn't have to turn the pages because they had the creators involved. But the movie would be Sin City. All right.
Ooh,
So as
Alan
far as it,
Moore.
no, Frank Miller.
Oh wait, Alan.
Yeah, it's
What
Frank
am I?
Miller.
Oh, Frank Miller. My bad.
Yeah. Okay. So with that one, I consider that a
Shows
literal
what I know.
translation because there's literally scene to scene in that. It's basically just a live action comic. I mean, almost literally. That doesn't happen too often where every scene in the movie reflects a literal panel in the book. Now, obviously, in between motion and stuff, you can't do that, but the key spots and the core story is lifted right from that. So it's a translation. Doesn't happen very often. The Watchmen tried it, but
Uh,
had to make some changes. Yeah, it's okay. But Sin City is probably the gold standard for a translation, in my opinion. There would have been a very close second, but the death of Brandon Lee prevented that. And where are you at? Uh,
oh, that's right. The Crow was good. Was turned into a comic.
no, Crow was a comic first
Oh.
by James O'Barr, and the reason he wrote it and the way the movie worked out, creepy and stuff with the emotional content. But that would have
Ooh.
been a very close second for me, or if not first, had things not gone
Yeah.
badly.
And then we just got those semi okay shitty sequels after. I think The
Money Machine,
Crow.
man.
I think had Brandon survived, I think there probably would have been a sequel because I imagine there was a lot of Crow comics.
Initially, no, it was a one and done. It was to keep James O'Barr from doing himself. He he lost a loved one to a horrible car accident, and The Crow was basically his catharsis for getting past his emotional trauma,
Ooh,
and that's why
yeah.
it's written the way it is. So it was a one and done shot, but it was so popular that there ended up being a lot of Crow comics later on. I mean, hell, the Crow thing goes back to the Civil War and ancient times and blah blah blah. They really kind of expanded the universe. But all I was getting at is like the translation versus adaptation, and then the reverse, like you were asking about. Okay, so we had Alien and Aliens and stuff, and because of that, we got great Aliens comic books.
We
We
also
got
got Star Wars as well.
great
Yeah,
Predator comic books,
Jeez.
Terminator, as a comic book, all right, that went the other direction. And believe it or not, some of those comic stories will rival anything on the big screen because once again, it's made by fans, blah blah blah. Uh, so the adaptation working in reverse seems to sometimes be better.
I mean,
It
I mean,
really does.
oh no, I wholeheartedly agree. Another example, the first time I ever seen a comic book that was based from a movie was Star Wars.
Sure. Oh, that started back in the '70s, man. That hit the ground running with Marvel taking that. That just did its thing and went, and it was great. And even into the '90s, like with the Dark Empire series and stuff. Oh, yeah, they've always been phenomenal.
Yeah, the as we call it, the extended universe.
Yeah. Oh, sure.
And
When it was still
those
Um,
valid.
comics, many of which are considered canon.
Yeah, because they're
You
that good. That's what I'm saying, Bob. Exactly, because they're that well done. They're that cohesive. They're that coherent that they
that's
actually
right.
put them into the canon.
They're taking. I've noticed what they're doing now. I can't remember their names. The people who are behind the Mandalorian, Book of Boba Fett. The names are
John,
drawing a blank. Yeah, John Favreau. They're finally like looking at the extended universe from the comics, and they're bringing them into the
And the
TV shows.
novels too. And the novelization of the Grand Admiral Thrawn was first introduced by Timothy Zahn in the Heir to the Empire series, which was
And
the
then
first
and
series
then
of
he was
books.
brought into Rebels.
Yeah,
So,
and that was
it can work. It can work, which I'm glad to
yeah.
see more
Oh,
of.
sure. But like I said,
Um,
based on history, it seems to work in reverse a lot better than it does the other way around because you're not restricted by time, you're not restricted by an already set canon. Predator's a good example because the first movie didn't give you anything. There's like no world building other than this guy has got some badass stuff and it's a great idea.
and he's just
But
killing everybody.
and the world's your oyster as far as developing a world around it. So Phil Norwood and Tom Veach and all those guys that did like the Alien versus Predator and the Dark Horse people that got the license early on for the Predator comics
Oh, that's
just
right.
took a great idea.
Dark Horse
That was
worked on
them.
Predator.
Yep. And could go crazy. Whereas going from a comic with an established lore and world building and stuff that's
You can do
already
whatever you
there.
want.
Well, no, I'm saying taking the comics that have already, like we had said before, had 30 to 40 to 50 to 60 years of history and trying to translate that into a movie is a lot harder to do because you're going to have guys like Bob and I that are like, that's not fucking accurate, you sons of bitches, or he never said that because they try to do that translation. Doesn't work. And an adaptation's fine if you get the core of it right. And that's where a lot of them fall down. They might look right, they don't act right. They might act right, don't look right. You're going to have this struggle across the board. Now,
Well, we did kind of have a cure to that with the MCU. Um, it just took 4 words to let people know that the Marvel Cinematic Universe was not going to follow that closely to the
yep,
comics,
yeah,
and those 4 words are, "I am Iron Man."
yeah, which works great if you set it up like that. And they have the means, the methods, and the mentality to do so.
And
But
Robert
it's
Downey
those.
Jr. I mean,
He was
Oh
an
no,
asshole.
it was fantastic.
he is
I
Iron. I mean, he is Iron Man.
as much of it as a divergence from the source material as most of the MCU is for what it is. It's like Kirkwood with The Walking Dead. The comics were its own thing. The series was another. I'm totally fine with that. I have no problem with it. I have the same opinion anymore about books being translated into movies. You got to take them as separate entities.
Oh yeah,
But the
take
problem
it with a
is
grain
when
of
they
salt.
yeah, well, the problem is when they try to present it as accurate to the source, and it's so far away from it that it's like unrecognizable. That's where you start getting people like, "Oh man,"
Oh
and or they
no,
just don't
definitely.
care.
Like you were saying, like how you and Bob, you guys grew up with the comics, so when you see it on the screen, you're like, "That's not right," or "He's not
Yeah.
supposed to do that." And I'm not again. Just to let everyone know, we're not gatekeeping, but
Oh no.
I have seen a lot where there are people who have never read a comic book in their life. They'll see something is like because they're used to like, and this all started basically with the Marvel Cinematic Universe. People started watching that, never read a comic, so when they see a character do something on the big screen or a TV show that they did in the comic and they're not familiar with that, they're like, they don't do that. Why is She Hulk twerking? Is like She Hulk jump rope naked in a comic book.
Sure.
She Hulk
Oh, I
was
I
She
even
Hulk
have
teamed
the
up. She-Hulk teamed up with Howard the Duck.
Yeah. Well, see, that's what I'm saying. If you take it as two separate entities and you do it right, like Feige did with the MCU, it's fine because they are completely separate entities. Like the Civil War in the comics was not the Civil War we got on the
Oh
big screen
no, I've
at
seen
all.
I saw the cover to Civil War, and you see like you see almost every Marvel character
It's
from
well, it
A-lister
is.
to C-lister going against each other. You see like the X-Men, you see Spider-Man, you see characters
Oh
I don't
well,
even know of.
and it was also a huge crossover event with multiple titles and stuff. And and I'm sure Bob is on the same page with me that if you take it as two separate entities, as long as they get the characters right or the core of it right,
Yeah.
that it up on the screen's fine. In my hands reading it, that's cool too. I'm fine with that.
Whatever direction you're going in an adaptation, if you get the spirit of the original right, then what you do with the details is kind of secondary. Civil
Yeah.
War, the example, as you just mentioned, it was a huge crossover event. If you wanted to do a closer to accurate Civil War,
Oh,
it would have had to been its own phase.
probably
So,
like 12 movies maybe, and that would be even truncated from there.
I
yeah,
mean, it probably would have translated better if you were to do a Civil War based on the comic. You would have to do
Cartoon,
something like it.
animated. Yeah,
No,
it's the
yeah,
you
only way
know,
you could.
you have to. I mean,
to have it narrow it down to just one movie, they got the core of the
Yeah,
issues just about
the
right.
conflict. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. And then once again, rights and all that stuff had a huge part to do with why we didn't get to see more of it. But that's not really the point. Just getting that is like if you can get the spirit of it right, you can get the core of the characters right, the rest of it falls into place. But there's so many independent comics that I feel deserve an adaptation that we'll never see because either A, they were never popular enough, they're too derivative, too out there, things like that. Like one of my favorites is one called Fusion, anthropomorphic sci-fi. Okay, it's great. Um, it nobody knows. I mean, it's Eclipse Comics, which have been gone for years, but that was a great series. We'll never see an adaptation of that. Another independent is called French Ice. All right, it's a great, but these would work perfectly as animation.
yeah, no
You'll
one
never
would take
see
it.
them.
No one would
Yeah,
take it seriously if they was to be live action.
But even if you did, I mean, I can imagine French Ice and a few of the others that I like that as live action, but it would be done as shorts.
Oh
And
no,
then in today's environment, a lot of the fan films and some of this other stuff is done better than the big studios because they're not doing it for money; they're doing it for caring. It's much like we talked about the last time when Bob was with us too. Um, you get the right people and you let the creatives be creative, you get stellar results. If you get too many people that just like, I know what the goddamn public wants. This is what we're going to put on the screen. Throw it all up there.
or you just
It
read too
just
many
falls
comics
apart.
and you read too many comics and you just want to add them all in.
That has its downfall too, but a true fan knows that you can't do that, and that's why big crossover
Sometimes it
events.
works.
Yeah,
And
it can, but very rarely.
oh yeah, no, I mean, and like you were saying about like those comics, you were talking about like the comics I've never even heard of, like French Ice and Fusion. There are
you know,
I can't remember the name of the comic, but it was going to be translated into an animated show, but it got axed. There
That
are
happens to a lot of them.
there are comic books out there, not your super well known, like your indie comics and everything. They want to turn it into an animated TV show, but it's like, okay, but who's gonna know this? No one knows this. If like
Um,
someone's grandfather or aunt may know it, but like the younger generation may not know it. Someone like me,
okay,
I may not know it, but I wouldn't mind watching it just to see
okay.
what it's
So
like.
you know who Jackie Chan is, right?
Look, I mean, who
Okay, all right.
doesn't?
Well,
oh,
hold on. The reason why I'm asking is that Jackie Chan's a big name, right? He helped sell the movie version of City Hunter that nobody knows what the hell manga that is, but it's been around for a long time.
Did they make it into
He,
an anime movie?
well, yeah, but the live action was with Jackie Chan, and
I didn't
so
know that they did a I mean that the
yeah.
art style looks cool. I mean, and so
Oh, it is. It's
technically
great.
mangas do count as comics.
Oh, more than almost anything else. But anyway, what I'm
So
getting at is like you can get a big name attached to since you mentioned like, oh, nobody's ever going to know this and that, but you know the guy in it, so you'll go see it because of that and generate popularity that way. So that's one example of how that works with translating and making an adaptation. And some of them come out fantastic. Uh,
I can name one that didn't really do well.
I can name two that you're probably thinking of too.
It came out in the 90s. It was and it was what people would call whitewashed. It was Fist of the North Star, which came out in the
Oh,
90s.
okay. So funny you mentioned that because Hokuto no Ken, I have that's issue number 1 right there by Tetsuo Hara and Bronson. Yes, it had Adrian Pasdar in it. It had
Dante
Chris Penn.
Bosco.
Yeah, yeah. It. Oh yeah, even Malcolm McDowell's in it. That was
Yeah,
extremely whitewashed.
as the character's as the main character's father.
Yeah, it. That is about as big a departure from the source material as you can get, other than the looks and kind of the feel. But it was a no name, but it was popular, and
The
it had been
manga
around for
was
a
and
long
the
time.
anime
Oh,
was. There was a
oh yeah,
manga and then the anime, and then over here in the States, we're like, you know what? That's doing well over there. Let's translate it well over here.
and it yeah.
And sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes it does. It just depends.
Now for what that one was, it was all right.
They try to they try to add stuff from the comics. I've noticed like one of the scenes when Kenshiro is beating up a guy, his face turns around. It looks like it was pulled out of the manga itself.
Yeah. Well, and the Guyver is a good example of going from. Well, actually, I think the Guyver actually started as an anime. I could be wrong. I remember watching it as an anime, but I don't know if it had a manga version or not. But the Guyver was really cool. The As far as a live action, that was great, and there was a lot of people behind that screaming at George, Evil Ted Smith. A lot of these.
Screaming at George, the makeup artist.
Yeah, the makeup artist in Rockstar. Yeah, he helped with the makeup
Oh, that's right.
effects and all that.
I know the name because he did
Big Trouble in
a
Little
movie
China.
a movie called The
Society.
Society.
Yeah,
Ugh,
Society. Oh yeah. Oh,
ugh.
you're talking to a horror fan here, dude. But
We're getting off
s-
topic.
well, no, what I'm just saying. But some of these translations with the right people and the right creatives, the end result may be
And
a little under
sometimes
the radar,
getting the
but they're
sometimes getting the
good.
original creator sometimes getting the original creator involved of the original source material is a good thing because then you can ask them, hey, you know,
Yeah, or at least they keep you on track. Like I said with Sin City and a few others. But there's been for just as many good ones. Like we go, like I was saying
oh,
earlier,
we're
you've
gonna
got
get to the we're gonna get to the bad ones.
yeah. There and what's unfortunate about some of the bad ones is that they shouldn't be. Bob, were you ever a Swamp Thing fan?
Yes.
Okay, so
I
was
haven't
I.
seen the comics, but I've seen all of the screen adaptations.
Are we
Okay,
talking about the series from the 1980s?
well, no, well
The
you're
movie?
talking about the late that was the early '90s Swamp Thing series.
I
Yeah,
remember
okay,
watching that as a
but
kid.
there was two movies prior to that, one of which John Carpenter was involved with and stuff. And once again,
That's the
not
one I
bad.
saw as a
Yeah,
kid,
okay. And then there was one with Heather Locklear later on, the Swamp Thing Returns
which
and
was a
all that
love
stuff.
interest. Yep, I saw that.
Yeah,
Actually, that's the one I saw.
okay.
Because there's a scene where she's kissing him and he's all human like.
Oh yeah, they went completely different than the source material. The reason why I ask about Swamp Thing, there's another one that they really didn't know what to do with comic wise. Alan Moore like revitalized the entire series when he took over that run with like Roots of the Swamp Thing and made it really serious. I mean, it's a great series. There's a 5-part series to revitalizing that character. Um, and yeah, that's the one. Yeah,
Yep, that's the one I saw as a kid.
yeah. You call me Swamp Thing. Yeah. So,
Jim Buenos Surf. Fuck, I'm not gonna try to pronounce that name.
but that's one that the character arc in the comics, even as silly as the idea is, was very good. And Alan Moore really elevated it and made it more serious instead of just a big talking plant guy, which is kind of what they did with Man Thing in the Marvel universe. But what I'm getting at is by the time it was getting taken serious in the comic, and they started seeing that hey, there's money in these adaptations, is how we got that '80s movie, both of them, and then the series tried to make it serious. It's tough. So here's one that goes the other way
Mm,
around: is that you've got a really good source that you can just like literally translate over to these story arcs, and they kind of failed to do so because of either technical limitations, or they just kind of hit a wall and like, oh, we don't want to retread the same ground. But realistically, and the reason I bring him up is mainly because of you, Wayne. Is like these are some of these D-list characters that aren't big top shelf names, but are really good characters that your only exposure to are some of the weaker attempts to get them on the big screen
Or video games.
or video games or something like that. And Swamp Thing was one that was really well done, but only
I just
in the
feel bad for the
comics.
actor. Where I just feel bad for the
Oh,
actor wearing that suit, though.
any of them, any variation of that suit would just be terrible. I can't even imagine.
You were saying, Bob?
Dick Durock, who played the Swamp Thing in the two live-action movies,
Yeah,
actually enjoyed it. He liked the second one better, but
it was a better suit too.
Oh,
It
what
wasn't
in
all
'89?
rubbery.
I
Yeah.
mean, he also got to play with Heather Locklear. Come on.
Well, yeah. Come on. And cool rubber monsters and shit.
oh, I mean, look at that. But anyway, I did see both. I have seen both movies, and I do want to say, as long as I don't try to connect them too closely together, I like them both.
Yeah.
I mean, look in the comics. Swamp Thing's like a big, burly, thing, and in the movie they couldn't really do that, especially with the budget restrictions. So they had to make it, normal, a guy to fit in a suit, not like
Yeah,
some
and
giant
then the
puppet.
the problem was they kind of lost
Dick Durock
sight
was
of
kind of
what the spirit of it was and all that kind of stuff because he's basically an elemental. It's a man's consciousness in a plant.
Oh
Is the
yeah,
way to break it
the
down. That's all it really is.
Alec
so
Holland, I think was his name.
horror vibe to it that Alan
Yeah,
Moore had given it, and the second one had more of a vibe like Adam West's Batman.
yeah, sure.
Louis Jordan and Heather Locklear and everybody played it just wonderfully, and it is
And have
hilarious.
fun.
Oh yeah,
And fun. So these are two different ways of adapting the same character, and for me at least, they both work.
yeah. Oh,
Oh,
absolutely.
The animated series that came on a little bit later gave me a slight headache. My wife loved it. Um, she and my best friend, she and our best friend, like to tune it in every Saturday while it was on. But maybe it just turned me off that they used the adaptation of the song "Wild Thing" for the theme song.
Yeah, it's just one of those that see, and then
I don't think
with
there
with
was.
your
I don't think there was another live action version until the thing on DC Universe a couple of years ago.
yeah, see, that was the second attempt.
wait,
Yeah.
DC Universe trying to make another live action Swamp Thing?
Yeah, it only got one season before DC Universe was no longer a thing. But
Oh,
yeah,
that's right. It was more horror based. It was going to be on the
yeah,
CW, but
yep,
they axed it. I remember seeing a trailer for it. We didn't
yeah.
get to see Swamp Thing. He was like kind of in the shadows, like how
But it got
Jaws
a,
and
s- a-
Spawn
a
was.
slight run on the DC universe, and then it's gone now.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently,
I
there
remember.
was a lot of clamor for it coming over to HBO Max. I don't know if we'll see it. They did it for Harley Quinn. Maybe we will. Maybe we won't. Who
The
knows?
problem with it was that it was filmed on location in North Carolina, where they were expecting the same kind of, went into it expecting the same kind of deal that they had in Georgia, and they and the person who was in charge of it in North Carolina ended up giving them like 10% of what they were expecting on the tax breaks and everything,
Ooh.
and they couldn't justify it based on that.
Yeah. Plus, DC Universe just dying every minute that it was a thing and stuff. So yeah, it was easier to axe the whole thing. But yeah, that was the second live action attempt. The first one wasn't terrible. I mean, it was campy and fun. It still had a slight horror vibe the way it was shot. But yeah, like I said, the whole reason I bring him up is because there's a really good, well-established character that hasn't really ever gotten a fair shake. And Wayne, you're in an interesting position to have seen be right in the middle of both adaptations. Age-wise and exposure. You know what I mean?
I
You
was
hadn't really read the comics.
at the age
You,
of 5. I was exposed to a lot of comic book movies that were the original source material horror like Spawn. I didn't even know there was a comic. I didn't even know
oh
there was an
yeah,
animated series. The Mask, another good example. I watched the movie as a kid. Didn't realize that the comic is a very dark and twisted and
oh
holy.
it's horrifying. It's whew.
They made there was a there they made a fan film. And then a year or two later, we got the Mask animated series. Who the character Stanley Ipkiss was voiced by one Rob Paulson.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
better known for various things like Pinky, Gecko Warner,
Oh
uh,
God. What has it? Him and Frank Welker have voiced like
Ninja Turtles.
everything.
Oh yeah. But I want to get on that next topic of how a horror type comic or how a graphic novel gets turned into something lighthearted and family friendly. I mean, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, another good example. The original comics, dark, twisted, blood, everything brought it's brought to the live it's brought to the big screen or small screen, and it's more family kid oriented,
Yeah. There's a
which. Mm.
lot of history on that one.
Oh,
Yeah. Uh, there's a reproduction of issue number one, and you can see just by the tone how dark and
Oh
stuff it
yeah, and they're
is.
all wearing and they're all wearing red. They're all wearing the same colored masks.
Well, originally they were all black because it wasn't a color comic, but
Oh,
still,
that's right. It was. I remember
yeah,
seeing
it was all black and
pictures,
white.
like black and white. Yeah.
Oh, I've got a lot of their stuff from Mirage. There's Fugitoid, and I've got like Gizmo and Fugitoid and Gobbledygook, and I've got a bunch of their earlier stuff because they were, you know, just hot and nobody knew what the hell they were. Um, that one is interesting because the tonal change helped them, and the comics started reflecting the popularity of the turtles are a weird one because if you noticed, since you brought them up, every couple of years they're reinvented, and the thing that
That,
destroys the previous generation is the current one.
That's.
You know,
I mean that's always been a thing with adaptations. Like we don't forget the old one. Look at this new one. It may do well. It may be a steaming pile of dog shit. We don't know. We're just gonna say we made
but
this thing
they
that's been remade 20 fucking times.
but they're still popular and they're keeping themselves relevant by updating in right directions, but by destroying everything that came before it, which is an interesting dynamic and mechanic, but it works for them.
Batman is a
It
good
does.
example for that.
What's that?
I said Batman is a good example for that because Batman is
Um,
probably it's DC's fallback, and I love Batman. Don't get me wrong, but Batman has been done so many times as you're basically beaten. And again, nothing against Batman fan all the way, but I've noticed Batman is probably the out of all the comic book characters that have been adapted to the small and big screen, whether it's animated or live action, he's been done the most. He's got the most attention. He's their golden boy, so to speak.
yeah, and you know what really started that trend, uh, as far as being taken seriously, was that right there, Dark
Frank
Knight
Miller's.
Returns.
Yep,
Dark Knight Returns,
I have that.
and also
Yep. I
Year
got,
One.
I got, yeah.
Yeah, and then Year One was another one that was a huge influence. And what it did was it actually started grounding everything in a more serious note that you can take these guys that everybody thought of as ridiculous and silly and put them in a grounded universe that's more realistic and time touched them and stuff like that because Dark Knight Returns is still influencing Batman to this day.
Mm-hmm.
Comics and big screen adaptations, which I have no problems with because it's probably one of the best graphic novels that I mean I'll fight anybody on it. Between that and Watchmen are probably the top two
The
ever,
the
ever.
animated Dark Knight film
It's all
parts one and part two were
yeah.
after reading the I animated movie first part one and part two, and then then later on I got the I'm like yeah they're like they're this basically took it out of the
Oh, it's
comic.
phenomenal stuff.
So next thing I want to bring up are bad adaptations. We kind of briefly touched on that. I want to talk about I want to talk about like good good thought, bad execution. Bob, what would you say out of all the comic book movies, TV shows you've seen, what would you say your least favorite is? And again, for those who are watching, this is our opinion. Watch it yourself and give your own opinion. We're just stating our opinion. Don't listen to our opinion. So yeah, Bob, what would you say your least favorite adaptation has been over the past few years for comic book characters?
for, over the last win.
Um, yeah, what's been
Or
your least?
ever.
Yeah, like out of all your years of seeing cartoons and live adaptations of these characters, who would you say your least favorite adaptation is?
uh, Late '90s motion picture Batman and Robin.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
That,
I,
I mean,
That's
that,
bat nips.
that's
that, that's my point. That is a minor thing. But how do you get George Clooney, Chris O'Donnell, Alicia Silverstone, Alfred Goff, um, um, with Uma Thurman, and Arnold
Ar-
Schwarzenegger together in a movie, and the best performance is from Arnold.
What
uh
killed the dinosaurs? The Ice Age.
it that was Schumacher and just losing his grip on
A-
stuff.
And
That
I think you
that
were
poor
telling,
movie.
I think you were telling me, Brian, in our Nerd Fact Friday, you were saying how Schumacher basically gave a verbal apology.
Oh yeah, on the special features for that movie. Yeah, if you listen to the audio commentary, he basically just comes out and says, "I didn't realize it at the time, and if I upset any of the fans, I apologize." I mean, it was basically just every couple minutes he's just apologizing for the movie. This wasn't what I
An
intended. I'm so
example of
sorry.
never an
Yeah.
example of never read an example of never reading the source material.
I actually developed a headache when we saw the screen fill up with the Bat Visa.
Oh
Never
yeah.
leave the cave. Never leave the cave without it.
That actually, yeah, that actually literally hurt my head when that came out. And Arnold Schwarzenegger was the only one who really put in a good performance on this, and we had this lineup that I just named of really top-notch actors who, in every other time, has not disappointed. I mean, Chris O'Donnell was good in Batman Forever.
Oh yeah, no,
He was very
he
good in that.
was. He
Somehow
was, and he was.
this movie is, for me, it is the poop standard.
Oh yeah.
I mean, and this
It's
was also the guys who played as Alfred and Commissioner Gordon. This was like their fourth return. They're the only two out of all the Batman movies from like '89 up till Batman and Robin, which came out in like what '97.
Who was it
They're
that
the only
played? Who was
they're the only two actors who stayed on.
for various reasons too, which is really weird. No two reasons are the same
And Chris
for
O'Donnell, I
why
mean
people would come back.
Chris O'Donnell returned for this one. I know Val Kilmer was done. Um, Michael Keaton basically quit as when Tim Burton didn't get any, recognition in forever. So, I mean, Schumacher's idea was to make it campy like the series from the 60s, which I'm probably he watched when he was, a kid, but never reading anything else or probably I mean I'm not, I'm not just on the man, may he rest in peace. But I get what he was trying to go for. He was trying to go for a more family friendly oriented Batman like back in the 60s and stir away from Tim Burton's scary um universe.
For me,
But he
Batman Forever hit the right tone in terms of that. I mean, it was mostly a straight superhero. Had a few little Easter eggs, a few little gags. Holy rusted metal, Batman!
Oh,
It's right there.
huh?
Oh, cool. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, Forever at least was a decent mix of the two. You were getting the what they were
Plus we got to
considering
see
comic
the
booky vibe.
plus we got to see the Val Kilmer wear the iconic bat suit before it switched to the all black.
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah. But at least that one had a decent mix of what they were considering to be comic booky movies and the Burton. See, because like the '89 Batman and Batman Returns really aren't, in my opinion, and I saw them both in the theater. Looking back on it, they're not really Batman films. What they are Tim Burton movies that happen to have Batman in them. I know that sounds weird, but if you really watch it with that lens, you get a really good idea what I'm talking about because Burton is famously
True.
saying he never reads comics. He's
No,
never read
and
one.
in the 1989 Batman film, you really can't see a Burton. You can't see Burton's touch, but Batman
Oh,
Returns.
watch it
Bur-
again. Watch it again, and yes, you can, but not as overtly as Returns.
You know,
Danny
Tim Burton
DeVito,
basically put his fingerprints all over Returns. You can
All over
tell.
that, yeah.
Danny DeVito's Penguin has affected every portrayal of the Penguin since that I've seen.
Oh yeah,
At
no, I
least,
mean,
yeah, with the flipper hands and stuff, the animated series and some of the
yeah.
others, yeah.
So that's where so the Penguin was modeled after DeVito's Penguin then
Yeah,
from
with the
the
flipper hands, yeah. Because prior to that, yeah. So
Penguin had like opposable fingers.
Oh yeah, he was just a regular guy. He was just extremely smart and just like
And
lonely and stuff. His original origin story is it's sad. You know, he was just a little beat up, English boy and stuff. And yeah, if you read his origin, which I think actually is mentioned in Batman Year 3, if I'm not mistaken,
Hmm.
I
And
think it is. But yeah, his original origin. Well, of course they changed that all. But yeah, the animated series Penguin's based on DeVito because there were aspects of that were definitely like noteworthy. But all
oh yeah.
all I was getting at is like I'm right there with Bob. You you can see the gradual rise and then just that plummet and setting that bar so low that almost anything past that has got to be better. There are some questionable
to be
entries
fair,
in that though.
seen Steel with Shaquille O'Neal.
Ah.
The Superman that wasn't. Yeah.
The
I get
suit
I
though,
love
that suit,
I
that suit, that suit, that suit.
however, on the other hand, I have seen Green Lantern, and I still give it a D plus.
Oh, the Ryan Reynolds.
Ryan Reynolds, I still
The
give
super
that a D
don't make the
plus.
super suit green or animated.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um
the only thing, yeah, the pacing was the only thing problem I really had with that was a lot of it was too slow paced. But
Oh yeah, no.
I did
Well,
like
there
Green
was
Lantern.
various issues with that culminated with the pacing
Yeah,
and enemy portrayal. If they'd gotten one or all or any combination of them right, the rest of it probably would have fallen to the wayside because Mark Strong, I love that man. He's
mhm.
a phenomenal actor. He did the best he could with what he had. Ryan did the best he could with what he had. Everybody in there did, but they made the enemy just Parallax was crap. It was kind of like the Galactus issue with Silver Surfer. They just didn't know what to do or couldn't. Uh, and then if you pace it wrong, it just the holes in the armor start to show really fast, and then the rest of it's like I just don't care because I'll forgive a lot of stuff. I mean, as nitpicky as we may be sounding, Bob and I and you, Wayne, we'll forgive all kinds of stuff. I'll just sit there and enjoy the shit out of this. And,
Incredibly forgiving when it comes to these movies. Most of
yeah,
them, there are two movies that I just
yeah.
I can't stand, and one of them is Batman and Robin. The other one is Will Ferrell's Land of the Lost, which
Yeah,
the trailer brought me to tears, so I did not watch that movie.
yeah. I Nothing will beat the Sid and Marty Krofft original. Those guys are phenomenal. Even the
so
Kyoto Brothers reboot, which I love the Kyotos. I mean, I'm not wearing it right now, but I normally have like my Killer Clowns shirt on when I do these. Uh, their revival on Nickelodeon was at least a decent attempt. But see, you go to once again when we translations just not even from comics, translations from known entities in TV series and stuff, trying to get a reboot and stuff, hit and miss. So this is nothing new. It's just that you get the wrong people behind it. You get the wrong attitude. They miss the point of what made the original good, and it just falls apart. Or it goes,
explains why that Wonder Woman that 2000 that mid 2000s Wonder Woman TV live action TV series reboot never they had one episode and that was it. It was supposed to be a modern, like it was supposed to be like the Wonder Woman TV series from like the 70s with Linda Carter, but this was like mid 2000s. This is like around, yeah, this is like around the time of Smallville
yeah,
when they were trying to make pre CW, I should mid to pre CW, when you had Smallville and then shortly after you had the Birds of Prey live action TV series.
that never got a fair shake either. Unfortunately, that should have.
Agreed.
No, well, it was under Smallville's shadow.
Yeah.
Oh, at that point, almost everything was Gen
This was like
X,
again, this was
Gen
like this
13.
is like pre CW verse Arrowverse
Yeah,
as they call it. We got to see some that were, some that didn't, and some that were just like, yeah, let's no, never mind, let's not do that.
Well, the Wonder Woman you're talking about, that was with Adrienne Palicki.
that sounds right.
Give me a minute.
Well, some of the costume tests and some of the stills that were released were phenomenal. And then they did the costume change, and then it just died. You never
Oh
saw it
yeah,
again.
yeah.
Because
Here's an example. And then no, this is not from a porn. This is a clip.
Yeah,
This is an image from the TV show. It was supposed to be like Linda Carter's back in the 70s.
okay, there've been four actresses I know of.
Adrian Palicki, yeah.
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 Initial release was 2011. but it just it never went anywhere. Oh, Pedro Pascal was supposed to be in it. Well, at least he got his chance in Wonder Woman 84.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
It
Which I haven't seen also, but anyway. There have been four actresses who have played Wonder Woman. Kathy Lee Crosby, in a failed TV movie, which was neat.
Oh, where
Um,
Wonder Woman was blonde.
yeah,
yeah.
and that was Linda Carter, the classic, Adrian Palicki, and now Gal Gadot. And the one thing is we're as we're getting into greater diversity with most of the Marvel and DC characters and casting in different races and sometimes gender swapping them. Wonder Woman is one character where I wish we would go the other direction and actually cast a woman who is Greek.
We'll probably never see that, unfortunately.
No,
Not in
and
my anyway.
and we're not and we're not here and when we're talking about like different diversity of different characters, skin colors, we're not like hating on it. We're not gatekeeping or
I
anything.
like it.
Just for anyone listening.
Yeah.
I for those who may not know or do know, like for example, Nick Fury was originally white in the comics, and his very first live adaptation was played by David Hasselhoff.
Yeah, and then later Marvel created their Ultimate Universe, and since the original Nick Fury was based on the guy who was supposed to be the Ultimate of Cool at the time, which was um, Dean Martin,
Yeah.
who had, by then he had split with Jerry Lewis, and he was doing his Flinch movies, and he was like Mr. Cool, and so they said, okay, who is be the Ultimate Cool right now? And the answer they came up with was Samuel L. Jackson. And so they contacted contacted Mr. Jackson, and they said, okay, if we use your likeness for Nick Fury. And he said, as long as I get to play him in the movie. And
And
7
then
years later, it happened.
oh yeah, no,
Yeah,
and in
and the
future anime
comics followed right behind it.
and in future animated adaptations, Nick Fury was based off Samuel L. Jackson's, just like how after Iron Man's success, future adaptations of Tony Stark were based off of Robert Downey Jr.'s look.
Well,
But
that's following the money too.
Samuel L. Jackson had been the likeness of Nick Fury in the Ultimate Universe for 7 years before Iron Man.
Yeah. Yeah. Not as exact, but he looked really, really close. And then once the MCU got that ball rolling, they made him almost 1-to-1. It was fantastic to see that change. But yeah, that Ultimate Universe was pretty cool. But you have that freedom to do that though too.
Oh,
And
yeah.
yeah, as far as the gatekeeping thing, Wayne, yeah, I really like the latest Dune adaptation. They made Liette Kynes a woman in black. I don't care. I'm not worried about
I
it.
actually I have the well again that's for a different podcast.
Yeah,
Um,
but I'm just
uh,
saying, as far as like the gender swapping or any of that kind of stuff or whatever, I'm not worried about it. But no, that's the least of my concerns in the broad scheme of things. Like what they did in Captain Marvel with Marvel and all. I don't really care, but you got to get the core and the spirit right. That's
oh yeah,
that's the key,
I agree.
and ugh, that's the problem.
Now two comic book movies I want to talk about that was was probably hated on, and both were female led roles. The Supergirl movie from the '80s, and then Red Sonja.
Okay,
Both two movies that were like they wanted to bring in at the time '80s. They wanted to have more female led roles because female comic book characters were like sex appeal and everything or whatever. And I couldn't even finish Red Sonja. I was probably like 15 minutes in. It was like, what the fuck is this?
Red Sonja's not necessarily a comic book adaptation directly. She was a character in the original Conan books, and then got her own series, and then got comics, and then
By Marvel.
oh yeah, I mean when they got the Conan license, they kind of went crazy. Oh, so Supergirl, cash grab. That's it.
You can watch that movie on HBO Max, but
It's
I didn't see much of it. I saw like a trailer.
you didn't miss a day. It's bad, and
I'm
it's
like,
got freaking Faye Dunaway in there. Peter
as
O'Toole's in that bitch.
oh,
Everybody. That
Faith Dunaway is Supergirl. Like the outfit.
no,
I mean,
that was Helen Slater as Supergirl.
oh,
Faye
and
Dunaway was the evil witch.
oh, that's right. The character she fought. Yeah, I remember. I mean, yes, Supergirl is blonde, and again. I didn't watch it. I saw the trailer. I'm like, okay, I can see why. I mean, I may
It's
still
bad.
watch it just for the hell of it. Like I said, I to this day, a year later, I refuse to watch the rest of Red Sonja because, like, the comics are great. I'm
Mhm.
sure, from what I've seen, like the comics are great, and people, but like again,
That's a
good idea, bad execution.
um, they were capitalizing on the popularity of Conan, obviously, and then you had I mentioned Yor. There was Ator. There was a lot. I can't remember if the first. Oh, I don't think it would have been out by that point. But you had a lot of those sword and sandal high fantasy movies coming out in the '80s that were just being pumped out left and right, and they're popular. Dragon Slayer, not Dragon's Lair, the video game by Don Bluth, but Dragon Slayer with Peter McNichol, were coming out. They were making a killing in the box office,
And
and they were
were they
trying
ever
to grab
were they
every
ever
property they possibly could.
were they ever turned
Uh,
into comics
what's that?
with Dragon Slayer or
Dragon
any of
Slayer.
those?
There was a Marvel movie adaptation. I have that one, but
Hmm.
it never got its own run or anything like that that I'm aware of anyway. But I'm just saying, those sword and sandal high fantasy films in the '80s were. I mean, there were so many of them. Like I said, Yor, Ator, um, and Conan, which really elevated what you could do with that kind of movie if you took it seriously and put the right people in the right place. But they started capitalizing on that, and that's how you got Red Sonja. I mean, little Ernie Reyes Jr.'s in there. Okay, whatever.
Arnold
I'll,
Schwarzenegger is in the Red
he's
Sonja movie, but he's not
as
playing
that
as
priest.
Conan.
No, it's not Conan. It's that priest. I can't remember what his name is. Paul Smith is in there. That's Bluto, man, from Popeye. Oh God, I forgot all about that one. That's another. I have that one too. That's another really good adaptation, in my opinion. I have a thing for Robert Altman and stuff,
But
but
yeah, I didn't realize. I thought I didn't realize. Yeah, and, but yeah, apparently the movie sucked bad. But when Marvel came out with the comics, I think what a few years later, people were like, "Yeah, we like this. We don't like this, but we like this."
because it was done well, and you can get away with a lot more in some of Marvel's adult magazine
And
type
I'm
stuff,
sure,
like
and
the
I'm
Savage
sure,
Sword and all that.
and I'm sure, in a few years, maybe they'll go back to some of these characters for live action. I mean, the live action Supergirl movie got axed.
Deservedly so. Did you watch the last couple seasons of that show?
No, no, I'm not talking about the TV show. I'm talking about how we were going to get Supergirl in the live action movie and the DC universe.
Yeah, because of
No,
how poorly the TV show did, popularity for the character just tanked. That's what I'm getting at. It just there's no reason to bring that up. After Wonder Woman '84, they weren't going to get it right. Is all I'm getting at. It's unfortunate because Wonder Woman was a good standard, and if they had kept that ball rolling and hadn't screwed up the Supergirl TV series as badly as they did,
yeah.
and kept that going, you probably would have gotten a really good
I mean,
Supergirl adaptation.
they're nowadays they're trying to bring back. I mean, Batgirl got the solo Batgirl movie got canceled
Yeah,
for
that's
obvious.
yeah,
I
that's
mean, it would have been
tax
nice.
reasons.
It would have been nice to see Brendan Fraser as Garfield Lens, aka Firefly, in my opinion. Would have been nice to see him come back as a comic book character. The Blue Beetle one, we don't know. Like, I'm glad to see that they're wanting to bring these characters to the big screen or to the small screen. But then, like, once they like, oh no, we can't do this. We need to axe it right away before even like before like a trailer's released, and then let's bring Batman back for the 100th time. Batman,
It's
come on down.
because of the money and popularity,
Mhm.
and that's just what it boils down to, and the relatability for some of these characters too. There's a
I'm
lot
not
to do with it.
again. I'm not trying to knock. I'm not. Yes, Bob.
People who've been running DC and Warner Brothers for the past few years just have their heads in the wrong orifices, basically.
Oh,
And it, there's a
They're up something.
emphasis on keeping She Who Must Not Be Named cast as Mira. And,
yeah.
it's just been one huge train wreck. And I have said it, but what they really need to do is let is go ahead and finish out this Wonder Woman trilogy, let the Shazam franchise play its way out, take
Let
a year and start all over.
Aquaman. Yeah, this new guy that's come on, he's basically he's the DC version. He's basically what Kevin Feige is to the MCU. He's saying once Black Adam, Aquaman are done, he wants to basically like Bob was saying, refresh, turn the DC cinematic universe into the Marvel cinematic universe, like how they did with Iron Man back in like 2007, I think, or
Eight.
'Recast
2008.
Yeah.
everybody.
Huh?
Recast everybody.
Hmm.
Yeah. At this point, it's
Right?
your smart choice to just hit the reset button and do the new 52 thing or whatever, like they did in the
Oh,
comics.
Yeah, I'm not
No,
just.
I'm
yeah.
just talking about resetting the universe.
It
DC
worked.
in the comics, they've been doing it off and on for sadly a lot longer than they should have because they would get so far, things were going so well. Ah, man, we fucked up. Hit the
I
reset
mean,
button, and then start it
right.
again. Oh man, we fucked up. Hit the reset button, and it's not for the same reasons Marvel's done it. DC just I love their characters. Their characters are fantastic.
Oh
It's
yeah,
just
no,
improper
no, I agree,
representations on multiple fronts.
and I will say this, and I will stand on this hill, and I know some people agree. The DC animated universe is better than the live action universe because
Oh, oh,
for like the past eight years or so, ever since Son of Batman, that Son of
oh,
Batman, the animated
fantastic!
movie,
The
and
Long Halloween was fantastic.
And Justice League War and everything, like there was a New 52 universe
Yeah,
From Justice League War, which when they first encountered with Darkseid, to Batman's to the solo Batman New 52 films, from Son of Batman, Batman versus Robin,
yeah,
um, you know, and then the last one was Justice League Apocalypse, which was the recent one
it
before
was
at
good
the end
too.
where Flash just reset the universe,
Again,
like
yeah,
again. God damn it, Barry. But yeah, no. Um,
they just can't seem to get it right. There's another good example of really good characters, semi okay adaptations the first time around, and then just falls flat.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
Uh,
and even back in the '90s, we were. What
the
was that,
DC
Bob?
universe, I think, was really kind of defined from Batman the Animated Series through Justice League Unlimited.
Mm-hmm.
That,
yeah,
yeah, that
And
right
then
in there.
Batman Beyond.
And that one right there, and that, yeah, Batman Beyond, I think, is included with that. But that stretch of animation is kind of the gold standard for setting up a televised.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
the late '90s, early 2000s. Those animated series were connected. Static Shock, the spinoff.
there's
and
quite a
then
few. Yeah,
And then right now, the DC extended universe is kind of more of the poop standard.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean they're doing a lot of back and forth. You had the Nolan verse, which ended after in total of three movies, all perfect films in my opinion. Not
Mhm.
nothing was wrong with those. They all did exceptionally well. But then you're going back and forth. You have the DC universe, but then you're like, okay, we don't know what we're doing, so let's reboot this other, start this other franchise with with the Robert Pattinson Batman, from which, in my opinion, not bad. Will it go anywhere? Who knows?
Okay.
We have the luxury in the movies based on what they've done in the comics to have
At
the
least Marvel
multiverse
has
thing
their shit
being a thing,
together.
right? So, oh, this isn't the main line. This isn't the main line. This is just one possible, outcome. And
DC's going back and forth. They can't make up their mind on what they want to
but
do.
technically now with Disney owning as much as they do, Marvel's going to start doing the same thing since they actually introduced the multiverse.
Oh
Which
yeah.
I'm fine with because we get to see as long as it's good, they get the spirit right. I'm fine with however they do some of the stuff on screen. Um, the problem is it's one's driving the other and it's never the same. So sometimes it's money chasing after the popularity or the popularity chasing after the money, and then much like what happened with Star Wars, the focus started becoming in merchandising and not the quality of the films, and you start running
Money,
into
money,
that.
money, 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 money.
Yeah, and it unfortunately, as much as that drives everything, and I understand that because these are not cheap to make. If you don't get the right people in there, I would have loved to have seen what Edgar Wright would have done with Ant Man. Okay, that sounded fantastic to me because you got a huge nerd behind the camera and helping write it that just never came to pass because they were confining him.
Wait, there was to be an original Ant-Man before the Paul Rudd one?
No, that's who was supposed to be directing and helping write was
Oh.
Edgar Wright. Like that was in development hell for years before we ever got it. So what I'm saying is, studio restrictions because they understand that these things make a gang of money now. they're putting them in boxes. That's why like I said, I like these side ones and some of these other adaptations and translations for what they are, and fan films and everything because they're made by creatives, the people that care, the people that were
Oh
involved
yeah,
in it. It's a better quality product. But the
I've
first
se-
time out, if it does well, all of a sudden the vultures are on the corpse and they're fighting over rights. Or hey,
I've seen a lot of DC fan a lot of more DC fan films than anything, and
they're fantastic.
they could be. I
Yeah.
mean, I've seen a Batman one. I've seen multiple of those.
There is somebody
Um,
in Los Angeles who does a lot of fan films, including DC characters. Um, and two that have really stood out to me are one with Jesse Quick and one featuring Zatanna. I can't remember which
ooh,
it was. And the gal that was playing Zatanna,
I would love to see her. I would love to see like an origin TV show with her.
we will get back
Closest
to
you
that
gotten so
later.
far is Young Justice, but
The
yeah.
gal playing Zatanna actually has a skill of being able to speak the lines backwards. They can show her what it is forwards, and she can do it right off the top of her head, which
Oh,
makes her
nice.
Zatanna, and she looks the part, and she is just fantastic.
Like I said, Zatanna is someone I would like. She's been in the video games. She's been in the anime. She was, her first animated her first animated appearance was in Batman the animated series from the early 90s.
Mm-hmm.
We wouldn't see her again until Justice League Unlimited.
Mm-hmm.
I think she was in Young Justice before that, if I'm
Young
not
Justice.
mistaken.
Wait,
I
I
believe
know
so.
she Young Justice, a show that came out like the late 2000s.
There's, well, okay, because of how they had to split the seasons up. I'm talking with the first run, which was a while back. I think is when she was in there first before Unlimited. I believe. I don't know.
Young Justice came out years after.
Was
Yeah,
it? Well, okay.
Yeah,
Like I said, some of
yeah.
these I watched out of order
Oh yeah,
because they were like splitting seasons up with the 5 year gaps and stuff.
Young Justice is where we see a younger Zatanna. I would like to see, in my opinion, I would like to see a Zatanna. It could be done. I mean,
Sure.
depends on the need for it. But I could see as a Zatanna live action TV series where she starts off young, being trained by her father Zatara. You know, slowly becoming who she is nowadays. Depending, she's had so many depictions, and we've seen a young version of her, we've seen an old version of her.
I'll give you
It,
something different. Yeah, have you see? Did you see her the two appearances of Zatanna on Smallville, where she was played by Sarah?
no, so she did have originally have a live action.
She has
It
had a
was
live action. She appeared twice on Smallville. She was played by Surrender Swan, who later went on to play Medusa in the Inhuman show, and she's on. I can't remember the name of the show she's on now. She's playing a coroner. I think it's called Coroner. Um,
yeah, but
Oh
Smallville, her
damn!
appearance was way
yeah,
late though, wasn't it? That was like
Oh wow,
season
yeah.
8 or 9 or something.
yeah, then she
Yeah.
is.
Okay, she does. Okay,
The first of the
fuck
two
me, I
episodes.
forgot.
Then a year later,
Oh yeah.
she was back, and and she explained to Clark that she was in a situation where her father had disappeared, but left behind all these cursed artifacts around, various modern things that were cursed, and she was going around collecting them, going around the country and around the world
Oh
collecting them.
wow, I didn't realize she was in Smallville. I
That
mean,
would be
and
brilliant.
poor
Yeah,
Green Arrow.
Uh,
yeah, I thought that would be a brilliant premise for a Zatanna TV show where she's having to go from place to place to collect these
oh, that was
artifacts.
probably the original intention. I totally forgot about her being on that.
So that is Zatanna. So you're seeing that version of Zatanna from Smallville. What is going to originally have her own spin-off series?
Probably.
Oh, that would have been cool. I mean, the actor.
Brilliant concept for a series now if they decided to do that in the Arrowverse, but of course the Arrowverse is shutting down.
There was going to be
Yeah.
another spin-off series for Aquaman, as well, from the
Um,
Smallville universe.
there was. It was very, very, very short. Look it up. It was very short lived.
I saw the opening like I think that
Yeah.
was the
It.
idea, but I think with how
Yeah.
the spin-off series for the spin-offs because it was in the same universe, the Birds of Prey TV series, which came out like a year after Smallville, which apparently was in the same universe, like
No,
that did. Oh, it wasn't.
was not.
Oh,
No, it was in its own universe.
okay,
It was a separate entity. Yeah.
okay, but it's like
That's why
I
they
think.
had the naming problems too, because of the rights issues and stuff. Yeah, that was an interesting show.
It's why in the TV series Gotham, Jerome is not called Joker. He's called Jerome or Jeremiah
He was
Yeah,
not.
because
it-
Yeah, he was supposed
licensing issues.
to be Jerome with Jeremiah Valeska, one of the twins, and they
Hmm.
went through um, all of the Joker's story arcs that they could get their hands on, and of course, Cameron Monaghan took everything that was thrown at him and carried it like
Oh
it was.
yeah, no,
yeah.
he carried that show, in
He
my
carried
opinion.
Yeah,
the
now
best
see,
on that show, and there were some pretty good performers,
I
including
mean,
Sean.
yeah, and speaking of that Joker, he had, like you said, there was many versions. There was Death of the Family. There was Jack Nicholson's Joker. There was Mark Hamill's Joker. There was Heath Ledger's Joker. There was campy Joker, noir, clown. Like you said, a bunch of Jokers thrown at once.
yeah,
So he was able to handle everything that was thrown at him. And people who Star Wars fans may have played Star Wars Jedi: The Lost Order.
Oh, Jedi. Yeah, I played that game.
Yeah, he's the player character on that, and he's done a whole lot of other things. Um, I made mention a while ago on Twitter that he would be a good Johnny Storm, and somehow that got to him, and he responded saying that he would not want to do Johnny Storm, but he wanted to play Reed Richards. But I think that the entire
yeah.
Fantastic Four, nobody'd be able to tell that it was the same person.
Yeah, no, and Fantastic Four is another example of a adaptation that was an idea, but wouldn't become a thing until like early 2000s when we got the first one and the sequel. Because I think it was either Brian or it was Phil from the Nerd Fact Friday podcast who was saying the part one.
That
Was
was
it?
me talking
Yeah,
about the Roger Corman one. Yeah, yep.
that you can just that's basically that's been pirated because they never fully released
Yeah,
it.
they never released it,
Just like you
and
were saying with the 1997 Justice League film, was a
yeah,
thing, was made but never released to the
yep.
public. Not
And
even like,
I've yet to see anything more than still shots from that one, but I have seen that fan four, and you guys were just talking about Smallville and Gotham and stuff, and as far as comic book adaptations, loosely based, light adaptation, fell victim to themselves. They're like so many of these other attempts. They start off really strong and progressively get worse because they either get too popular and the studios step in and like, oh no, 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 this is the direction we got to go. We got to appeal.
or they just
Um,
add in so many goddamn characters. It's just like, okay,
well,
well,
that's the other thing I was going to say too. They much like what happened with the Flash. So the John Wesley Shipp Flash series never got a fair shake. It was really good for what it was.
great score by Danny Elfman and came out like around the same time as Batman the Animated Series
Yeah, it was like early '90s.
because
It was really cool.
Mark Hamill played as the Trickster,
Yeah,
which he would return later on to voice the
yeah.
Trickster in the
Well,
Justice League series, and then return for the
live
late
action
2000s
and
Flash
the
series.
Flash. Yeah. So that never got a fair shake, and some of these that did, like Smallville, in my opinion, ran a little too long before it got super interesting. But it wasn't intended to be a Superman thing, and I understand that. But by the time it started getting to the end of its run, it had run out of its own steam because it did that, and sadly, Gotham's doing the same thing. They start off strong and then get throttled back, and it happens unfortunately to some of these long run ones that uh, you change creatives, you change direction, you like Bob had
They
said way back
basically
at the beginning, you
they
lose the
ignore
spirit.
they ignore the main focal point.
Yeah, you lose the spirit of what made it so strong, and it just disappears. I'm not a real big fan of serialized comic adaptations too much anymore, with a couple exceptions, and they're all animated. Like that new Harley Quinn. Oh man, I
Oh,
love the shit out of it. That's fantastic.
I
The
love
last
watching.
season, I was just blown away at how well mental illness was handled and a few other things. It's
And
just wonderful.
speaking of the gal who voices Harley Quinn, Kaylee
Kelly, yeah.
Cuoco, she's the second actor from Big Bang Theory to voice Harley Quinn. Because before that was Michelle Roche, who played as Bernadette. She voiced Harley Quinn in the animated film Batman and Harley Quinn.
Hmm.
Backing up, to the 1990s Flash, what happened with that one is that it was never on in a consistent time slot,
Nope.
and
Got jumped around all over.
part of that was because of scheduling of sports and other things going on with it. Part of that was because of the special effects budget. They couldn't get it done in time, so they had to postpone. But the programming guy who had been in charge of programming, vice president of programming while it was on, 6 years later said that basically apologized for it. He said that if we had left it in the time slot and given it a fair shake, it would still be on the air 6 years later.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
By the way,
It-
guys, we have a 9-minute window before we end this live.
Okay, and then, but then also, as far as I'm concerned, John Wesley Shipp was a decent Barry Allen, but he basically personifies Jay Garrick.
Oh he got to return to play both Jay Garrick and an older version of his character from the '90s series in the Crisis on Infinite Earths during
and
the
Barry's dad,
Arrowverse.
which is awesome. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
A couple times on the Flash, on the
yeah.
Arrowverse.
Yeah.
But
But
he was fine as Barry Allen, no complaints. But as Jay Garrick, he continues to really shine.
Golden Age comic. What would be no Silver Age? Because I know what Jay Garrick was originally the first Flash, right?
The
yeah.
first Flash of the Golden Age.
Yep.
He was the
Yeah.
Golden Age.
Yeah.
It was
Some of these adaptations, they get characters cheap and just throw it on the screen because
Red Tornado and the CW verse. Hmm.
That was one of their major mess ups. Hopefully they get.
Basically,
well,
basically make him look. You made him look like Vision. I saw like clips and images of. So anyone who's seen Red Tornado, and I'm gonna make this brief. He's basically an android robot in a bunch of the adaptations.
yeah. Overall, for me, what
If we
as far as any of these adaptations are, nobody was taking some of these things seriously as far as putting it on the TV screen, putting it in the movies. So the character rights got offered up dirt cheap.
Red
Yeah.
Tornado from the
Yep.
from the Arrowverse.
Interesting. I mean, it works. It's what it is. But what I was saying is like, some of these is because cartoons and animation rights and likeness rights for comics and stuff are completely different than movies. So a lot of these characters were getting offered up dirt cheap as part of a wholesale deal. Sony passed on everything but Spider-Man because nobody would ever care.
Sony's
Well,
basically.
they were stupid cheap. So what I'm saying is like much like a lot of other things, some of the Muppets, we wouldn't have had to Miss Piggy if it wasn't for a throwaway character. Elmo was the throwaway character. There's so many different things that like people are just like, here, you do something with this because it sucks. Daredevil would not have ever gotten popular if it wasn't doing so badly that they just gave it to Frank Miller to revitalize. So that kind of mentality with some of these live actions are the same thing. It's like, oh, we didn't pay shit for this, so I'm not putting any effort into it. Initially for some of these really bad adaptations, and by the time you get to the good
Sometimes
ones,
you can turn shit. Sometimes you can turn shit into gold, and sometimes you can turn gold into
yeah.
shit.
And what I'm saying is, by the time you get into the mid to late '90s, you started seeing a rebirth of some of the superhero adaptations that had been gone for a while with John Wesley Shipp and the Flash, a Mantis, which was its own original thing by Sam Raimi, Nightman. Oh yeah, see, Bob knows what I'm talking about. You started seeing a resurgence of these that were independent and not studio or comic studio owned, but then all of a sudden they're like, oh hey, I own the rights to this, I own the rights to that. These big studios, because they forgot all about it. That's how the '89 Batman happened. Warner Brothers basically sold the rights for like $5 kind of deals. Like, who gives a shit? Nobody's ever gonna care. But with that mentality going in, you run a very fine line if you don't get the right people in there, and we do get really poor attempts and really good attempts with poor results. I guess that's basically the way it works out. It just depends on who's behind the camera and who's writing it. And I'm 100% with Bob. That spirit, that core idea, as long as that's there, I really don't care what the costume looks like. I don't care what the story is. It's just it has to feel right. and there's so few of those that do consistently, or they start off like Gotham, start off really strong. Flash, I made it to about the fifth season, and I just couldn't care. Arrow was the same deal. They start off really strong, and then just kind of lose sight. And yeah,
Womp
with
womp.
a, I mean, you could almost pinpoint the exact moment when they tank. You just feel it, and it's like next season comes in, and it's like, oh, this sucks. Why?
Ooh.
Yeah, I don't. It's terrible.
Um. No,
Uh,
I agree.
Yeah, it's very
initially,
unfortunate.
what initially convinced me to come in on this, Wayne, was when you said you wanted to talk about things that we would like to see done.
Mm-hmm.
And I talked earlier about Zatanna, but Marvel, I think, is missing a big thing by not bringing in the Exiles. And this is a group of heroes, mostly X-Men related, who've been brought out from various worlds in the multiverse, and they're tasked with going around to various worlds and fixing what is about to go wrong.
Hmm.
And
That would
so
be.
it'd be easy, and it'd be fairly. We already have a couple of the parts precast already. One of the core members of the team is Blink, uh, Clarice Ferguson in the comics, but the two live action versions we've seen were Clarice Fong because they were played by Asian women. One of them was on the TV show The Gifted, Jamie Chung. Let's go ahead and bring her in to play Blink on The Exiles. Another member was Magic, Ilyana Rasputin. So there we get Anya Taylor Joy
Yep.
from New Mutants,
Hmm.
and then
I would just like to see my man Longshot get a fair shake at one of these points. Bring him in somewhere.
the right
Mm-hmm.
time to bring the Exiles in, and who knows that I think if it was a Disney Plus series, you could probably there's a high mortality rate on this team because you can kill them off without worrying about anything.
And you can bring in these ancillary characters that nobody knows but me. Like Longshot. It was
Or
done by Arthur Adams, man.
Garfield.
What's that?
You could bring in Andrew Garfield.
Yeah. You can do whatever you want. It would be fantastic. Because there's a lot that I could say, oh, I'd love to see in the big screen, whether it's owned by Marvel or not or whatever. But you have these opportunities now to show a lot of these D-list characters that nobody cares about and turn them in. Guardians of the Galaxy is a perfect example. No, I only read a couple of their comic books over like the past 35 years, but that movie was fantastic, right? Uh, you have these opportunities to do that, to take
two
something
minute
that
window,
nobody knows
guys.
anything about. Oh, that nobody knows anything about and turn it into gold. And I'm kind of with Bob. If you take a premise that can touch everything with varying results, do it. I'm all for it. But
Exile can cover a lot of the same ground as What If and Loki,
yeah,
and you have different. You can have Dreamcast characters playing whoever.
yeah, I'm all for it because then you can bring in variations of whoever the hell you want without lasting results to any of the mainstay stuff. It's its
and
own side thing.
basically screwing over your budget.
Well, you don't have to. You can do it on the cheap, really. I mean, all things considered. I'm with him on that, or do something with the Watchers, or something that you can actually touch all these things and like introduce Mojo World, introduce Longshot, introduce see what happened to Dazzler. I mean, whatever. All these weird characters that had their moment in the sun for very brief periods of time, but it's like let's see where else they go, and you don't or a different variation of characters we've already seen. I'm all for it. That What If series shows that it can be done.
Oh, definitely can.
Yeah.
Well,
Just unfortunate.
sad but true. I think that should do it. I know we didn't have a whole lot of people viewing this. Eventually, I'll be upgrading to the better version of StreamYard, where I can stream it on through Facebook and Twitter and everything else, and
Nice.
Twitch. But I think this went well. Again, you guys, I hope this went well for you for a first live geeking out episode.
That's fine. Apologize for my eating. I had a long freaking day
I know
today.
I need to eat here soon anyway. But I think.
Bob's
Well,
microphone.
hey. Again, you guys, thank you for coming on. For those who did watch, I hope you guys liked this episode, and then we'll be shortly able to watch it afterwards. I hope. Anyway, with that being said, again, I am Wayne the Unknown, joined here by Bob and Brian. As always, until next time, thank you for listening, and as always, thank you for watching.